There is a silence that follows certain people everywhere they go. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that feels like standing at the edge of something vast and unnamed, where the air is different, and you instinctively know something is happening to me that I cannot explain to anyone else. If you have ever sat alone at 2 a.m., not because you wanted to, but because something deep inside you was pulling you toward a conversation with God that you didn't even have the language for yet, this video is not a coincidence. You didn't stumble here. You were led here. And I need you to understand that before we go any further, because what I'm about to share with you is going to touch a part of your life that very few people have ever been able to name accurately. There are people in this world who are built differently. Not broken differently, built differently. And the tragedy is that most of them spend decades believing that the very thing that makes them chosen is actually the thing that makes them damaged. They feel too much. They see too much. They don't fit no matter how hard they try. And every group they enter eventually reveals that they were never meant to stay. That isn't rejection. That is redirection. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why God has been engineering your isolation, your intensity, your strange awareness, and your unshakable sense that you were made for something that hasn't arrived yet. We are talking today about the Omega calling. Not a motivational concept, not a personality type, a specific spiritual assignment carried by a specific kind of soul. And there are 7 signs that identify you as one of them. Before we go into each one, I want you to do something. Drop the word chosen in the comments right now. Not from me. As a declaration over your own life. As a moment where you say, I am showing up. I am paying attention. I am ready to receive what God has been trying to tell me. And if this channel has ever spoken to something real in your life, subscribe now, because we go deep here, every single week. Now let's begin. Sign number 1 is the one that will make many of you exhale for the first time in years, because it is the sign that everyone told you was a weakness. You grieve things that other people don't even notice are gone. You have walked through rooms where something sacred just ended, a friendship, a season, a version of yourself. And while everyone around you moved on in minutes, you stood there feeling the weight of it like a stone in your chest that no one else could see. They called you sensitive, too emotional. You learned to apologize for your tears, to hide your depth, to perform lightness you didn't feel. But here is what the scripture says. In John chapter 11, verse 35, we are given what appears to be the shortest verse in the entire Bible. Jesus wept. 2 words. But those 2 words are not filler. They are a window into the nature of God himself. Jesus knew he was about to raise Lazarus. He knew the story wasn't over, and still he stopped. He stood in the grief of those around him. He let the weight of human loss move through his body in real tears. And what did the people around him say? They said, "Behold how he loved him." Your grief is not weakness. It is love with nowhere to go yet. It is the signature of a heart that was designed to carry the weight of other people's realities. That is not a disorder, that is a calling. The ones who feel death most deeply are the ones God trusts to carry resurrection. If you have always felt that your sensitivity made you unqualified, I want you to hear this directly. God does not call the numb, he calls the awake. And you have been awake to things that others sleep through your entire life. That isn't a curse placed on you. That is a covenant quality woven into you. Stay with me, because sign 2 is going to explain why every time you try to build a normal life, something always came in and interrupted it. There is a pattern in your story that you may have called bad luck, or spiritual attack, or just the evidence that nothing good ever lasts for you. Relationships that seemed perfect suddenly ended. Opportunities that felt certain collapsed before you could step through them. Plans you built carefully were dismantled in ways that seemed almost intentional. And here is the part that makes this so disorienting. Sometimes it wasn't the enemy that broke those things. Sometimes it was God. Not because he is cruel, because he is a craftsman, and he will not let you settle into a life that is smaller than your assignment. Look at Joseph in Genesis. His brothers sold him. His master's wife lied about him. He was thrown into prison. From the outside, that is a story of relentless failure. But the narrative God was writing required that every human support structure be removed, so that when Joseph stood before Pharaoh, there would be no human being alive who could take credit for how he got there. God will sometimes dismantle your plan, not because your plan was sinful, but because your plan was too small. Every structure that collapsed in your life was a structure that would have capped your ceiling. And I know that is hard to receive when you are still standing in the rubble. But this sign, the pattern of interrupted plans, is not evidence of a cursed life. It is evidence of a life that God keeps refusing to let shrink. The question isn't, why did it fall apart? The question is, what are you being positioned for that required that it fall apart? And sign 3 is going to give you one of the most specific answers you have ever heard about your spiritual identity. And it involves something most people are ashamed to admit out loud. You have always known things. Not in the way that sounds arrogant, in the way that terrified you, because you were never able to explain the source. You would sense the atmosphere of a room before you entered it. You would feel in your body that something was wrong with someone before they told you. You would wake up from a dream that you could not shake, and 3 days later the dream walked out of the spiritual realm into physical reality. You told yourself you were imagining things. You buried this part of yourself because every time you tried to speak it, people looked at you like you were becoming unhinged. 1 Corinthians 12, verse 7, tells us that the Spirit gives manifestations, not to certain religious professionals, but to each one for the common good. The word used in the Greek is phanerosis, meaning a visible disclosure. God never intended for his gifts to stay hidden inside cautious people. He placed his discernment, his knowledge, his prophetic perception inside specific human beings, so that the invisible things of heaven could become visible, actionable, transformational realities on earth. What you have been calling your overactive intuition is actually the prophetic function of the Holy Spirit operating inside your nervous system. This is why the world around you often feels like it is operating on a frequency you can hear, but others cannot. That is not psychosis. That is prophecy in its earliest, most unrefined, most real form. The reason it has felt like a burden is because no one helped you steward it. That is what this season is for. Sign 4 is perhaps the most painful of all 7. And it is the one that will explain a specific kind of loneliness that has never been accurately described to you. You have never fully belonged anywhere. And before you nod too quickly, I want you to feel the specific weight of what that means. Not the loneliness of being disliked. The loneliness of being liked and still disconnected. Of sitting at a table full of laughter and feeling like you are watching from outside a window. Of having people who love you and still lying awake at night with the sensation that no one in your world actually knows the deepest room in you. That room, the one you don't let people into because you learned a long time ago that they couldn't hold it. That room is where God lives with you. And he has been jealous for access to that room in a way that made every human relationship feel insufficient by comparison. Psalm 139 says, "You have searched me and known me." The Hebrew word for known there is yada, the most intimate form of knowing in the ancient language. It is the same word used for the knowledge between a husband and wife. God is saying, I know the room everyone else has been locked out of. I have always known it. You have never been unknown. You have only been unseen by the wrong kinds of eyes. The sign of an Omega calling is that God has been your most consistent companion in the room where no one else could breathe. Your loneliness was not abandonment. It was appointment. He was preserving the deepest parts of you for himself, so that what flows out of you comes from the overflow of His presence and not the approval of people. Sign 5 enters the territory of spiritual warfare in a way that most people in your life have never had the courage to be honest with you about. You are under a specific and targeted kind of opposition. You have probably already felt this. There are people whose only explanation for their behavior toward you is that something in them reacted to something in you before you ever gave them a reason. Doors that seemed open shut with unusual speed. Seasons of your life that seemed promising were followed by sudden, inexplicable reversals. And there is a part of you that has always suspected, not with paranoia, but with a quiet, grounded certainty that what is happening to your life is not random. It is targeted. You are correct. And here is the theological reality behind it. Revelation 12, verse 17 says, "The dragon went to make war with the rest of her offspring, those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus." The enemy does not waste precision on ordinary assignments. He reserves his most elaborate strategies for the people whose callings carry the most collective weight. The fact that you have faced specific, unusual, relentless opposition is not evidence that you are losing. It is evidence that you are a target worth targeting. And in the spiritual economy, the intensity of the opposition is directly proportional to the magnitude of what God has assigned you to release. You were not attacked because you were weak. You were attacked because something in you, fully activated, changes the spiritual atmosphere of entire rooms, families, cities, and generations. The enemy studied your assignment before you did. That should not frighten you. It should awaken something in you that has been sleeping. Sign 6 is quieter than the others, but it is in many ways the most defining. You carry a hunger that food cannot reach. There is a specific longing in you that has followed you since childhood. An ache that you try to satisfy with achievement, with relationship, with belonging, with success, and nothing ever fully reached it. You are not broken because of this. You are built around a space that was designed to be filled with one specific thing, and you have been learning the hard way what that one thing is. Augustine wrote, more than 1500 years ago, "Our heart is restless until it rests in you." He wasn't writing poetry. He was diagnosing something biological about the soul. God did not create you with a cavity and then forget to provide what fills it. He created you with a cavity that He intended to inhabit. The hunger you feel, that relentless, unnamed, unsatisfied longing, is the most honest evidence in your body that you were made for a fullness that only His presence can provide. This is the sign that separates the Omega called from those who are simply religious. The religious person manages their spiritual life. The Omega called is desperate for it. You have not been able to function on a surface relationship with God because your assignment requires that you carry His weight. Shallow water cannot hold the kind of vessel you are. You require depth because you were built to operate in it. The hunger was never your failure. The hunger was always your compass. And sign 7, the final one, is the sign that I believe will be the most clarifying thing you have heard in a very long time. You already know. I don't mean that you have all the answers. I mean there is something in you, beneath the doubt, beneath the confusion, beneath the years of wondering if you imagined all of this, that has always known. You have always known that you were not here by accident. You have always known that the fire in you was not a personality quirk, but a purposeful placement. You have always known that the suffering was meaningful, even when you couldn't read the meaning. You have always known that God was not a concept you were supposed to manage at a respectable distance, but a living reality you were supposed to walk with in a way that looked unusual to the people around you. You have always known. Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Notice the tense. The calling did not begin at your conversion. It did not begin at your first ministry experience. It did not begin at your breakthrough. It began before your first breath, before your parents chose your name, before your trauma shaped your posture, before your doubt constructed its arguments. God had already seen you, known you, named you, and released you into time with a specific gravity inside you that would pull you toward this moment. The knowing in you is not arrogance, it is memory. It is the echo of a conversation that happened in eternity before you arrived in time. Now let me bring everything together, because this is where the script of your life takes a turn that many people never allow themselves to step into. Everything you have walked through, the sensitivity that made you feel too much, the interrupted plans that seemed to erase your future, the prophetic awareness that made you feel strange, the loneliness that left you unmatched by any human company, the opposition that targeted you with unusual precision, the hunger that nothing satisfied, and the knowing that you could never fully silence. These were not random characteristics collected by accident. These are 7 stones in a foundation. God has been building something in you with every one of these experiences, and the building is not finished. But you have reached a moment in the construction where the blueprint becomes visible. The Omega calling is not the calling of the first. It is the calling of the last. It is the calling of the one who comes after every other option has been exhausted, when the situation is desperate enough that only a vessel completely surrendered to God's weight could carry the solution. You were not called to be first in the world's economy. You were called to be last in the way that Jesus defined last, the servant of all, the carrier of the weight, the one who brings heaven's answer into earth's emergency. That is not a diminished calling. That is the highest one. So here's what I'm asking you to do right now. Not tomorrow, not after you feel more ready or more healed or more certain. Right now. Say yes to the conversation with God that you have been approaching but not fully entering. Not the prayer that asks for things, the prayer that stays. The prayer that lingers long enough for God to actually speak into the deepest room in you, the one everyone else has been locked out of. That is where your real formation happens. That is where the 7 signs stop being a list and become alive. Before you close this video, drop your word in the comments. Drop chosen or 777 or I receive as your declaration that you are not just watching someone else's calling, you are stepping into your own. If this reached you today, share it with one person who you believe is carrying something they haven't been able to name yet. Subscribe to this channel because this is not the only conversation we're going to have. There is more. And God didn't bring you this far to leave you in the hallway. The door is open. Walk through it. Your Omega calling is not waiting for you to become someone else. It is waiting for you to finally, fully become exactly who you already are.